Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. John Bonham died 43 years ago today. Do you guys remember where you were when you heard that John Bonham died? I don't remember where I was. Tell me down below if you remember. I was in middle school, but I had at least a couple Led Zeppelin records by then, and I loved Zeppelin as a kid. And I don't know, I was thinking about when I heard that today was the anniversary, I started going through old newspaper archives, and I was curious how people reacted at the time of his death. And I got to looking in all over the U.S., there was all kinds of articles written about it. It was mainly people reprinting the same stuff from AP or UPI. But it was in the smallest of towns, newspapers, in the big newspapers. And then I started seeing some reports from England, and those were a little bit different and a little more in-depth and more interesting to me. I thought I would share some of that. This is all the stuff that I'm going to share with you wasn't immediately after he died. Some of it will be like the next day. Some of it might be a couple weeks later or a few weeks later as people learn more. But the first thing I want to share, this is pretty much what was shared across the U.S., I think was from this article. This is in the Evening Standard, London. This is Diane Chanteau. The headline is "No Clues to Led Zeppelin Star's Death." It says, Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham is believed to have died of natural causes. A post-mortem on the 31-year-old millionaire at Windsor's Edward VII Hospital this morning failed to reveal an obvious cause of death, and the results of further tests are not expected before the middle of next week. At the moment, we're regarding it as a natural causes, said Mr. Ian Orger, the hospital administrator. Bonham was found in a bedroom of the 900,000-pound Thameside mansion belonging to Jimmy Page, and he was found by John Paul Jones, is what it says here. This is repeated over and over again. You want to say that he was found in Jimmy Page's mansion or whatever, but they always list how much Jimmy Page paid for it, which is kind of crazy. 900,000 pounds at the time was $2 million US in 1980. That's a lot of money, and it was owned by Michael Caine, I believe is who Jimmy Page bought it off of. But I thought that was weird. Just as a comment on society in general, they always reprinted what he paid for it, just like I just restated what he paid for it, so I guess I'm just as bad. It says, no drugs were found and suicide is not suspected. The four members of one of the world's richest rock bands, it earns $15 million a year, had been staying together at Page's house in Windsor. That's interesting. Led Zeppelin was making $15 million a year, and the first thing I thought of is we think that is a lot of money, but they're entertainers, and I bet you there were actors that were similarly famous that were making way more than that at the time. It's like right now when you think of the money that The Rock makes or that Oprah made at her height. Seems like athletes and musicians don't always reach those heights. But anyway, talking about money too much. Today, Jimmy Page, singer Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones were comforting Bonham's widow Pat at his farmhouse in Cutnell Green, Worcestershire. Now there are fears that the group that has sold 20 million albums since they formed 12 years ago may disband. Bonham was considered to be one of the world's top rock drummers and would be very difficult to replace. Police were questioning staff at Page's home, the old mill house. It is not the first time tragedy has struck the group, and then everybody kept reprinting that Robert Plant's son died when he was 5 years old, which I can imagine if you're Plant, you just lost your friend and drummer, and then you have to relive your son dying in the press over and over. This is from the Birmingham Evening Mail. This was interesting since it's right there where he lived and where he was from. This is by Jackie Bailey. The headline says, "Homely and kind, the man who died of drink." This is a few weeks later. Does homely mean something different to my English friends out there? I think it probably does. It might mean someone who just liked staying at home, I don't know, or down to earth. Homely, it's odd when someone dies and they would say ugly man, or plain looking person. So it must mean something different. But this is Jackie Bailey. The tragic death of Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham after a drinking spree has led to the band calling off an American tour. The friends have claimed band members are afraid to reform because they believe Bonham's death is linked to black magic. This is something that was repeated quite a lot since, and I didn't expect this in the English press so much. I would expect it in America, but it's really weird how the black magic just keeps coming up in these different articles. An inquest in Berkshire heard yesterday that the millionaire drummer drank the equivalent of 32 vodkas in 12 hours on the day he was found dead at the $900,000 home of Jimmy Page. Bonzo was carried to bed after a rehearsal when the drink made him sick, waterlogged his lungs, and killed him, the inquest heard. Says, today the news was met with sadness but little surprise by his music business friends. And then there's a bunch of quotes. It says, Led Zeppelin's former promoter, B.P. Fallon, a close friend of Bonham family, said in Birmingham today, Jimmy Page is interested in magic, but that doesn't necessarily mean black magic. Such a weird thing to read all of that. He read a lot about it, but he does not go and stand on mountaintops and make lightning flash from his fingers. I doubt if he has ever attempted a magic ritual. I've been known on camping trips, to climb to the top of the highest hillside and make lightning come from my fingers, just pretty much an attempt to kill all the nearby mosquitoes and make for a better camping trip, but I digress. And John took no interest at all. His passion, life apart from drumming and drinking, was fast cars. The 32-year-old star's home-loving wife, Pat, who he married when he was 17, was at home on Old Hyde Farm, Cutnell Green, with children Jason, age 14, and 4-year-old Zoe. Scroll down a little farther. It says, good buddy. Mr. Jim Rose, who runs the Plow Pub at Shinstone, said he had no regrets about serving so much drink to John Bonham, a man he described as a good buddy. Bonham, the inquest heard, started drinking at noon on the day before he died, downing 4 or 5 quadruple vodkas in orange at the Plow in the company of fellow group member Robert Plant, who lives near at Stourbridge. Mr. Rose said he was a real ale drinker. He was a good drinker. He loved his drink, and he loved his life. He was a boisterous fellow, but he was such a kind man, and I miss him terribly. In 26 years as a landlord, I have seen people drink as hard, and nothing has happened to them. I'm glad we think of drinking a little bit different now than we did in 1980, or at least serving people that much alcohol. I always felt he was uptight, especially before a tour, and he worked terribly hard. He was such a perfectionist. He had got to get it right. He seemed to be under a terrible strain before tours, and I think the coming American tour had got him uptight. But he was his own boss, and there is no regret on my part. I shall miss him. I still cannot believe I will never see him again. He had some of the nicest parties I've ever been to in my life. It says John Bonham's funeral will be held at Rushock Parish. It says John Bonham's funeral will be held at Rushock Parish Green Church, Cutnell Green, Kidderminster on Friday afternoon, followed by a funeral at Worcester Crematorium at Astwood Road. And I actually visited John Bonham's grave a year or so ago when I was in England on tour. And I'd wanted to go for a while, but it's way outside the city, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't have a way to get there. And my buddy Andy agreed to drive me out there one day, and so I got to visit it. And you can watch that video right here, and I'll see you guys somewhere down the road. Much love to you.